Hello everyone! The functions GROUPBY and PIVOTBY can group and aggregate data like pivot tables. So you get the benefits of a pivot table without actually having to use one. These functions come with many predefined calculations. But the question is, can these functions also replicate custom calculations done in regular pivot tables using calculated fields? In a regular pivot table, like I have here, calculated fields can be used to perform custom calculations, like multiplying a value field by a certain number. They can also have custom names. And several value fields can be used in a single calculation. For example, here, two fields are added together. So let's see if I can replicate all three of these features using the function GROUPBY. The third feature will be really tricky because of the way how the function GROUPBY works. My data range shows the daily online and offline revenue of a retailer. As preparation work, let's convert this data range to a table by clicking it and pressing Ctrl and T together. Then let's change the table design. Let's call the table Revenue. If new rows get added to the table later, then the formula referencing its columns will be dynamically updated. Let's first use the function GROUPBY to group dates by month and sum up the two types of revenue. The first argument are the row fields to group by, so in my case the months. For the months, I'm going to group the dates by the end of the month in which they are in. For this, I'm going to use the EOMonth function and multiply the date column by 1. This is a trick that I showed you in my last video to make the EOMonth function spill. The second argument are the values to be aggregated, and you can select several columns here. So I'm going to select both revenue types. The next argument is the function that will be applied to the values. I'm going to choose sum as one of the predefined calculations. For the field headers argument, I'm going to specify 0. I also don't want any totals, and the sorting has to be done by the end of the month in ascending order. So I'm selecting extra cells also for the future months. Let's format the cells to show months. I'm going to place the arguments of the function GROUPBY on different lines for better visibility by pressing Alt and Enter together. The function GROUPBY has the following rule. If there are several value columns like here and one function, then the function is applied to each value column. As an example, please compare the sums of both revenue types for January. To apply an individual calculation to each value column, there have to be the same number of value columns and functions. Here, the function hstack is very useful. For example, if I need the sum of store revenue, but an average of the online revenue, then I could use hstack and select average as an additional function. If there is a single value column and several functions, then they will be all applied to this column. Please compare average numbers if I remove online revenue. Now the averages are also calculated for the store revenue. Keeping this rule in mind, now let's go back to the question at the beginning of the video about replicating the functionality of calculated fields. The first part of the question was performing custom calculations. In my example, let's say that the revenues are without value-added tax, and we need to show total revenues with tax. Let's also say that the retailer is selling different products online and in the store. and because of this, the sales are taxed at different rates. In addition to the predefined aggregation functions, GROUPBY also offers the function Lambda as its third argument. Lambda can be used to create custom functions using existing ones. The first argument of Lambda is a variable or placeholder for the values argument of function GROUPBY. The rows in the values argument are grouped beforehand based on the row field's columns in the first argument of GROUPBY. Then, for each group, the corresponding subset of values is passed on to the Lambda function. Lambda in turn calls the function inside it that has to be applied to the variable. In our example, we need revenue with value-added tax. So the sum of the revenues in each input column has to be multiplied by 1 plus the tax rate. Let's say the tax rate is 7%. As shown earlier, because there are 2 revenue columns as input for Lambda, the custom aggregation will be applied to each one. If you need different tax rates for each revenue type, then 2 custom aggregations and function hstack have to be used. So I'm going to have 7% tax on store revenue and 19% on online revenue. The names custom1 and custom2 that the function GROUPBY assigned don't say much, so I need custom names. To achieve this, I'm going to use the function vstack to stack custom names on top of the aggregations. The curly brackets around the custom aggregation names will return an array, which will be like a row with 2 columns that will then be stacked onto the results of the 2 custom aggregations. And I could also make a dynamic chart from the spill range. Though in a real report, I would put the chart beside the range and not under it. Because I have end of the month dates, formatted as months on the x-axis, the missing months, where there was no revenue, also get filled in. A calculated field of a pivot table can work with 2 different fields. For example, total revenue could be calculated as the sum of store revenue and online revenue. Let's see if this can be achieved in the formula. For an easier explanation, let's first consider a table with products instead of dates. Let's calculate total revenue per product, meaning that we need the sum of store revenue and online revenue per product instead of per month. Of course, I could add a helper column to the table with the sum of both revenue types, but this would totally defy the purpose of having a versatile formula. Now this formula is going to be tricky because of the way that the function GROUPBY works. As I explained earlier, the function GROUPBY follows a strict rule. If there's a single aggregation function and several columns in the values argument, then this function gets applied to every single one of those columns. So in the Lambda, I will not be able to reference each column separately to add them up. So I need a trick. I cannot pass the 2 revenue columns as the values argument to the Lambda. But what if I use a different column as the values argument and pass it to the Lambda instead? So as odd as it may sound, I'm going to use the product column again in the values argument. Inside the sum function in the Lambda wrapper, I'm going to use the function filter. This function allows the user to filter a data range or array based on criteria. The first argument is the data range or array that needs to be filtered. Here I'm going to add the 2 revenue columns together. The second argument is what rows to include and should consist of a logical test returning true or false. Now I also need to use the product column, which is in the values argument of GROUPBY function in the filter function. And I will do this exactly in the second argument of filter. So my logical test will be that the product column should be equal to the unique product name from the column, which got passed on as the x variable. I need to use the function unique because of the logic of function GROUPBY. Otherwise, I will get an error. Let's check the result. And the total revenue for product 1 is correct. Now let's apply this trick to the original formula, which aggregated revenues per month. Here, I additionally need to use the EOMonth function with the dates column to get the end of the months. We also need to include the tax. So I'm going to multiply each of the revenue columns by 1 plus its own tax rate. Let's compare the sum of both revenue types with tax that were calculated earlier in this video to the total revenue for January 2025. And the numbers match. And if you like this video, please like and subscribe for more content like this.